good to be here. The first question that my esteemed colleagues and I wanted to get over with was, and you approached it, Scott, was whether we pronounced it Likert or Likert. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's pronounced Summated rating scales as far as my paper is concerned. So we're just going to start from that premise. Camp Casper, I'm at Rowan University, which is outside of Philadelphia. Home to some very good sports teams this year. Brian Edwards here was my dissertation chair, and this is part of a project that I worked on for my dissertation. Now, I may look old. This wasn't a 20-year-old research dissertation that we're talking about, but I spent 20 years in industry and then went back to Oklahoma State and got my PhD. So we've been working on this project for, well, maybe 9 years. So the foundation, what we wanted to do is look at summated rating scale anchors and look at the distances between the choices that were made for these anchors. To get there, we really needed to lay down a foundation. So we took a look at the most common context in which summated rating scales were used in our literature. And then we looked at the most common anchors that were actually being used, and some of those that had been studied in the 60s and 70s as well to lay a foundation. We looked at those, and we tried to get the older ones and the newer ones and say, okay, these are the words that are actually being used in these contexts. And then we would be able to choose or take a look at the psychological distances or the numerical values between each of these words on a number scale. After having done that, we were going to go back and test the assumptions. What were the differences, the numerical differences in those scales? And did it matter? Does it matter? Is there attenuation? If you use scales, anchors that aren't evenly spaced, does it matter? And spoiler alert, yes it does. Well, at least that's what our purpose is. And then at the end, we make recommendations and processes for researchers to use to evaluate the papers, the actual anchors that they're using. So let me take a look here. So when you create a summated rating scale, the anchors might be never, seldom, occasionally, frequently, always. You've seen this. This is a common flow of choices. A lot of times when we put together these anchors to try to measure the latent constructs that are unknown, we're trying to anchor those to a number line, a known quantity. Then we can use parametric statistics to evaluate those, means, standard deviations, hypothesis testing, etc. Well, if they don't have the same numerical distances between each, what does that do to the parametric statistical analysis that we do? Does it make a difference? So if you assume never, seldom, occasionally, frequently, always, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the mean is 3, the standard deviation is 1.6, but if you actually put them and measure what people think or where they think they fall on a number line, you might come up with different numbers. For example, take a look at the distance between occasionally and frequently. Not very far apart. As a matter of fact, they're almost synonymous, and you could actually flip those. And if people use a linguistic choice process where they're not going right to left, they're just honing in on a word, then you could really show some differences in how people are evaluating on their summated rating scales. So if you remember right from the foundation, to be able to evaluate these summated rating scales, we needed to find what words people were using to evaluate those. And to do that, we looked at the contexts. We went through 10 or so years of managerial journals and determined that about 1,000 studies, 962, were agreement. I agree, I disagree, that sort of thing. 1% were similarity. This is like me, this is unlike me, that sort of thing. Frequency. not absolute frequency, but more of a less absolute frequency. How many times is not exactly what we were looking at, and I'll talk about this in a little bit. Amount and judgment. If we took those contexts, we hit 95% of all the summated scale usages in the literature for the 10 years that we looked at the journals. Academy of Management, AMJ, and Journal of Applied Psychology. And then we took each of those categories, and through the former studies that have been done as well, when I say former studies, in the 60s and 70s, Bass, Cascio, O'Connor, and some others have done some reviews of the wordages of the words chosen for anchors. We also looked at the actual words that were being currently used in the literature. So for example, under the agreement context, came up with a list that looked like this. Strongly disagree. I know it's tough to read. Very much agree, disagree, do not agree. It seems that researchers have a wide variety of choices, and they make use of that wide variety of choices of words, and use, as you can see, it kind of walks down the scale. So we took large lists of the anchors that were potentially being used inside of each context. And then, to try to find out where people perceived that they fell on a number line, or where they anchored these verbal choices on a number line, in Qualtrics we took a slider, 0 to 100. And individuals could slide across where they felt a particular word choice or anchor fell on the number line. We did thousands of these and came up with the means that you see listed there and the standard deviations. Now on the far corner, or the far side, Tilton's measure of overlap was what they called Cohen's D back in the day, and it shows the overlap that can be used in the mixing of the words. You don't get a distinct value if you've got an overlap. Anchor spacing, you can see that you could choose anchors that were overlapping or not on your anchor values as they went up. With each of the categories, the more word choices, for example, this is frequency, the finer they became. And you can do that Cohen's D calculation between any choices that you might make. So you want to do 5 or 7 choices. You can come up with the mean and standard deviation and show the most valuable or the most representative of equal distances for your choices of your anchors. For 5-point anchors, which most people use 5-point anchors, agreement, frequency, and amount, these are 5 examples that have the best numbers as far as being equally spaced apart. Why does it matter? Well, when we ran equal versus unequal choices against real latent constructs, we showed a negative 0.17 attenuation. 28% actually difference between using equal and unequal anchor choices, which could be the statistical difference for significance. Studies that actually have statistical significance using the wrong anchors will show as not being statistically significant. All right, thank you. Oh.